Unions say firefighter numbers need to double to cope with the increasing intensity of Australian bushfires. Jim Casey is the State Secretary of the Fire Brigade Employees Union and he joins us in the studio. Jim Casey, thanks for your time. What makes you so sure that we need to double the number of firefighters?
Well, it's not my figure, it's the Climate Council. They've done some thorough modelling on the fire behaviour at the moment, the kind of conditions we're going to be facing as firefighters in the coming years. And their logic, and it makes sense to me, is that by 2030 we'll need double the number of professional operational firefighters on the ground in order to cope with these fires.
Now, there are also calls for an overhaul of how fires are fought in Australia, and part of that is merging rural and metropolitan services. Why do you want to see that happen?
The idea of a single fire service or some kind of more rational use of resources is something that professional firefighters have argued for now for decades. Look, it's just simply a question of economies of scale. Rather than replicating two separate fire services, having them essentially compete for resources, duplicating your communication structure, your management structure, let's just have one. The volunteers and the professionals work very well together on the fireground. We should just have one central management structure above that to allow us to do our job.
Do you think seriously, though, that metropolitan and then more remote rural fire brigades could be part of the same organisation? How would it work with the split up of resources?
I think there's a few misconceptions about the way fire services are organised in this state. As it stands right now, fire rescue has personnel right through every small country town or medium to large country town will have a fire rescue brigade. Volunteer brigades will coexist, and in the smaller communities it will simply be a volunteer service. So there's really three tiers of firefighters. There's the volunteers, there's the part-time, and then there's the full-time. Really, on the fireground, when we're actually dealing with a fire, there's no problems. And really, I think the idea that there would be some kind of tension or cultural tension there is something which is just not borne out operationally. There is a tension, a cultural tension between the management structures, and I'll leave it to our managers to explain that. But certainly, look, it just makes sense to me. We just make it as streamlined as possible so we can get on with the job. We need more firefighters on the fireground, not more managers in offices.
When it comes to actually fighting these fires, there is the belief that climate change is making things more difficult. What sort of changes have firefighters on the ground noticed, and what do they attribute to climate change?
Look, it's in a sense on the ground there's a bit of a boiling a frog kind of concept. You know, you do this for a living, you do it year in and year out. You might get a bit of a sense that things are changing, and then you have the wake-up call. Now, for me, it was the Black Saturday fires in Victoria. You look at that, the way that fire behaved, that firestorm behaviour. It's unlike anything I've personally had to deal with, and it's unusual for Australia. Now, that was Victoria. We had ACT a number of years earlier. We've got the news out of South Australia, Western Australia and Tasmania over the last 2 months. I don't think this is so much a matter of... I think the jury's in. We're seeing more extreme fire behaviour. We're seeing fire seasons that run longer. Since 1978 to 2013, the fire season's actually 19% longer. Now, that's not only 19% more time we need to be ready to fight it, it also cuts in the time for us to prepare for it. You can't backburn in conditions where bushfires can take off. So these quite, in some ways, incremental, small changes to climate lead to quite significant changes to the challenges we face.
Is the lack of resources, are we seeing that in recent times where we see interstate firefighters having to move to other states to bolster the resources there when they come under pressure?
Look, in a sense, that doesn't particularly concern me. We've always seen that kind of movement. For a campaign fire, as they call the large bushfires, you'll see that kind of shift. The bigger concern, and this really is the thing which worries me desperately, if the Climate Council is even remotely right that we are talking about a doubling of figures, what we are seeing at the moment with every state government is a reduction. Now, the more conservative governments are more aggressive. In New South Wales, we've just had a 2-year battle with them to stop them closing fire stations. Now, we've held the line there, but all we're really doing is keeping our head above water. If we're talking about an enhancement, a doubling of numbers, this is going to require real political will, real political vision, which leads me on to our real problem. With the doubling of the numbers, we're still going to be putting a band-aid on a wound. We need someone to actually treat the wound, and that's really a question about climate. It's a question about climate policy, and that's where I think the real crisis of leadership is in Australia and globally at the moment.
So what are your fears if these concerns aren't addressed? Does it put the public at increased risk?
Of course. I mean, look, the firestorms, we saw what happened in Victoria. How many has been dead over this fire season? I'll be talking, I think it's actually nine lives lost. That's the most extreme end point. But another figure, actually, Deloitte's, who you'd scarcely accuse of being soft on these questions, have estimated there'll be $500 billion a year of fire damage by 2015 on current progressions. So, yeah, this will hurt the community. This will hurt individuals, families. It'll hurt the economy. This will just hurt. We really do need to get on top of it. It's a manageable problem if it's dealt with now. And really look at, in a sense, it's the climate change issue writ small. Think about what's happening with your bushfires. That's what's happening to your planet. We do need to do something about this.
Okay, Jim Casey from the Fire Brigade Employees Union, thanks very much for coming in this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.